How's it going, guys? I am Focke, your local brick build historian. So today, well, it's the first time I've recorded in a very long time. Been very busy at work and all that, yada yada yada, you know how it is. So, this episode of Brick Build History, I am taking a look at the Brickmania Focke Wulf Fw-190 off the Focke Wulf 190. A-8 to be specific. They've done an F-8 model, which hopefully I can get my hands on sometime. But this is the A-8 World War II fighter aircraft. So, if you don't know, the Focke Wulf 190 is a German Luftwaffe fighter plane. Personally, to me, one of the most underrated, unsung heroes of the Luftwaffe. Everyone knows the Messerschmitt Bf-109 or Me-109, depending on which side of the camp you're in, but not a lot of people really know the story of the 190, so that's what I'm here to do today. Of course, first, let's do a review on the kit itself. So, starting off with the box, you have a very beautiful front picture here, kind of a 3/4 profile shot in color. You have the stand right there, which I don't have on my 190 right now, and it's just a really nice picture showing off the actual kit. Focke Wulf 190 A8 World War II fighter aircraft, 371 Lego elements and 1 minifig, designed by Cody Osell. Taking a look at the manufacturing plate, you have basically the same information as always. Brickmania kit 2298. Skill level 4 out of 5, which I think it's more of a 3. Not really that difficult of a build. And I got number 101. So the third batch, like the first one of the third batch or something like that. And you have the monochromatic top-down image, interesting, on the back. And here's the aircraft itself. So, one of the first things you'll notice is it is very, very print or sticker heavy. You have the spiral on the spinner here, which is kind of mesmerizing to spin and watch. I really enjoy it. And then you have the printing on the side here. It's on both sides, same exact pattern. And you have the stickers on the fuselage here. I don't quite remember what this little like tilde looking thing is supposed to be. But you have the bulking credits here. One on the top and on the bottom of the wing, and then of course the Brickmania Lego piece for the, well, basically for the where the swastika would be. They really did a good job. Well, Cody did a good job of really getting just the plain look of the 190. You have these cylindrical front going down to the narrow back, this cowling, which it's almost exactly like every other brick built cowling they have. The same, it's almost identical to the Zero, although where it differentiates is using this like clip piece here. Don't know if you can see it. They use that clip piece there instead of straight up using the, I don't even know what this piece is called, the 4-prong piece. So the cowling doesn't really move, like spin, unless you break it, which I kind of really like. On the Zero and all that, the cowling will like spin, and on the Newport as well. So it's really nice to have a cowling that will stay in place. You of course have the 20mm cannons shown here. and a really cool way of showing the 13mm machine guns on the top, and you can kind of get a good view from there. The cockpit uses this canopy piece, and I did a really horrible job of putting the stickers on, but oh well. But it gives it a nice curve down to the rear of the fuselage, where you have the back end, and of course the Brickmania frying pan for the tail wheel. It also is kind of weird in how the wings are on the aircraft. Usually you have some kind of piece going across to keep the wings together, but this one, it's very different. You have this 3-prong piece, this 3-axle piece in the center here, and then the wings connect to that. It allows for a really cool angle, as you can see, this angle right here. Instead of using the hinge pieces to get that angle, you use this axle piece, and it's really cool. It really does look really good. But it does have a downside. That downside being, if you look at it straight on, the wings kind of like bow down, and yet you kind of have to let it sit on its wheels for the wings to kind of be straight. And it's all because of the actual connection and how strong that connection is. I mean, you can still pick it up by the wings, it's just a little precarious. And the landing gear does like to fold in on itself every once in a while. Other than that, I really do like this kit. It is a really fun build. Once again, as I said, I think it's more of a 3 out of 4 than or 3 out of 5 than a 4 out of 5, especially since it's so few pieces compared to other 4 out of 5 kits. So I think Brickmania really should make that change. Other than that, this is just a really pretty aircraft. So from there, let's go on to the history. So in 1941, well, actually more like 1940-ish, maybe late 39, Germany realized that as good as their Bf-109s were, they just didn't have enough. They felt like they needed more, and, well, the Messerschmitt factory could only make so many. Plus, add to the fact that they're making the Me-110s and other aircraft, the Messerschmitt company needs a little help. So, what Germany does is they open up a competition for a substitute standard. The whole point of a substitute standard is not to replace the standard aircraft at the time, but to basically go alongside it. The only requirement was that it didn't use the 109's engine. The 109 engine was, of course, the Daimler-Benz 605. So as long as it didn't use Daimler-Benz really at all, it was open to the competition. Now, other companies would immediately turn to the Junkers UMO 210 or some form of a Junkers engine. The only problem is Junkers engines are also used in aircraft like the Stuka, any Junkers aircraft really. So those engines were also kind of a little bit unobtainium to a fledgling aircraft. So the Germans knew this problem, and so did designer Kurt Tank. Now, Kurt Tank was a relatively new designer to the Focke Wulf company. Focke Wulf has only been around maybe 10 years or so, and they did throw their hat into the ring for the original fighter competition where the 109 was eventually adopted, but their aircraft was horrifically just out of date. It was a biplane with fixed landing gear, all that, and it was just awful. Well, you bring in this guy named Kurt Tank with a few new ideas, and you come up with this. Now, the Focke Wulf 190, as it would become known as, or the FW-190, if you know how designations in Germany work, FW was Focke Wulf's designation. It became a honestly better aircraft than the 109. So it follows the protocol, or the issue of not using the 109's Daimler-Benz engine, and they also don't use the Junkers engine. They use a BMW 801 radial. Now, radial engines are used by basically every country, except for Germany, really. The only other high production aircraft in Germany that used a radial engine was the Junkers 52, and that thing was built in 1933. So a radial engine for a German aircraft was severely weird whenever you look into the actual production of German aircraft. Most of them use inverted V12s, basically, actually all of them, from the Fuselage to the 109, basically every bomber, so on and so forth. Now, the BMW 801 D2 engine used in the Focke Wulf would have it was a 14-cylinder dual row engine, meaning it's got 7 cylinders in the front, 7 cylinders in the back, and it produced 1,677 horsepower, and eventually they'll bump it up to 1,953. It was an air-cooled engine, meaning that instead of having a radiator with the cooling fluid to cool off the engine, because if you have little micro explosions in a metal case, it gets pretty hot. And when it gets pretty hot, then bad things happen. So when it comes to the air cooling of a radial, basically you just leave the front open and you allow the wind to cool it off. But that wasn't simple enough for the Germans. See, the Germans are, of course, they over-engineer, and they over-engineer the over-engineering. So instead of a just opening to allow wind to blow through and cool off the cylinders, they put an induction fan in the front. And I think it was like originally 10 blades going to 14 blades. But eventually, they just couldn't figure out the overheating issue when it came to their radials. Maybe because they decided to over-engineer the over-engineering. One other problem is the fact of supercharging. So if you don't know what supercharging is, basically it's using a turbocharger or a supercharger. There's the turbocharger uses the exhaust from the engine to spin a induction fan to blow air into the manifold. Supercharging uses a belt timer to force air into the manifold. Most fighters would use a supercharger because it takes up less space and all that. The Germans were very well known for using a variable speed supercharger. The other countries would use like a 1-stage or 2-stage supercharger, where basically it's either off or full blast. And there goes the cowling. So the Germans use a variable speed supercharger, meaning that it changes speed along with the engine. It has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is that you can basically have a constant manifold pressure as you go through the different altitudes. The disadvantage is, well, you can't really set it for high, like specifically high altitude fighting. So some of the Mustangs, their superchargers were only used whenever it reached a certain altitude, and then they'll turn it on, and then it'll give them a boost higher into the atmosphere. One of the other disadvantages is that they couldn't fit it into their Focke Wulf. It doesn't fit. It just doesn't work. It used a cone style pulley system where whenever the belt is at the end of the cone, it goes slower, but then whenever you bring it towards the narrow end of the cone, it goes faster. There's just not enough room in there. So the Focke Wulf had a big problem when it came to high altitude fighting. Basically at 20,000 feet was the cutoff. This is a big problem whenever most of the American bombers that were flying over Germany were going more towards the 30,000 feet. So if you're looking up and you see 10,000 feet above you is a bomber that you can't reach, you're more than likely not pleased. So basically, even though the Focke Wulf was pretty fast in low altitude and was said to be better than most Allied fighters until the Spitfire Mark 9, it just couldn't get over that hump of 20,000 feet. It was just, the engine couldn't keep up. So Focke Wulf, more specifically Kurt Tank, decided to start investing in making a high altitude fighter. This would be known as the TA-152, and it basically looks like a Focke Wulf with bigger wings and a V12 engine. Well, as a TA-152 was being produced, or was being designed, they had to come up with a stopgap, a kind of aircraft to hold over until the 152 could go into full production. So basically in 1940, like late 43, maybe early 44, the Focke Wulf company would start making what's called the Dora 9. Well, luckily for me, I developed my own Dora 9. So I'll move this over here. So what's the difference? Well, as you can see, I bought a second Focke Wulf Fw-190 kit and I modified it. Really the biggest difference between a Dora 9 and a regular A model or F model Focke Wulf is the engine and also the length. They call them long nose Focke Wulfs because its nose is longer. I think it's about 2 studs longer on the nose and 2 studs longer on the tail. But when you look at it, it looks like a normal Focke Wulf until you actually take a close look. One of the things you'll notice is the piston heads for the V12 engine. But you might be wondering, hey, didn't they choose a radial engine for a reason? Well, yes, but when the capabilities of the radial engine started to falter, they had to resort back to V12s, in this case a Junkers V12 engine. One of the ways you can tell it's a Junkers is the fact that the supercharger intake, which is this thing right here, is on the right side. So basically they took the Focke Wulf, lengthened it out a little bit, put a V12 engine in it, and said it was good enough until the 152 would go into full production. In actuality, this probably gave it another 5,000 feet of altitude before it started to do the same thing of just plain up sucking. So, in the end, was it really worth it to make a Dora 9? Probably not. The TA-152 itself was not seen as a real great fighter either, because by the time it came out, American and British air superiority was just too far, too gone, and the American fighters would just bring it to lower altitude, where the TA-152 was just abysmally bad. But in the uphand, we have 2 really cool aircraft, and I really enjoy seeing them side by side because you can really take a look at the differences, especially with the length of the aircraft. Now, of course, I also didn't put the stickers on the Dora 9 yet because this is just a prototype. But, I mean, looking at it, you can still kind of see the biggest differences. As you can see, the MG-131s are pushed forward so that it could be at the same spot behind the cowling. And you got a little bit of a longer sight to the nose. You have more of a gray, you have a gray stripe here compared to what it's like in the original A-8 models. Unfortunately for the Focke Wulf, by 1945 it would be deemed obsolete, especially since the jet age was coming in and the propeller age was coming out. So, I mean, by the end, I guess it wasn't really that bad of a idea to just completely give up on these, because whenever it comes to jets, you don't have to worry about manifold pressure. You just have to worry about going. So in the end, about 20,000 Focke Wulfs would be produced, and there are very few survivors left in the world, just like every other German aircraft, in all honesty. I know in the Flying and Combat Heritage Museum in Everett, they have both an A-8 model and a Dora 9 model. The A-8 model, I'm certain, has an original B&W 801 engine. I'm not sure about the Junkers on the Dora 9, but and they also have a Stuka that they're rebuilding. So if you ever end up in Everett, Washington, go ahead and check that museum out whenever it opens. Of course, the whole COVID thing has kept it closed for a while, but whenever it reopens, go ahead and make a trip over there, because it has a lot of cool different aircraft and tanks. So hopefully one day I can go down there and maybe bring some of these over there so that you can get a one-to-one look between the Lego and the real thing. So with that said, this thing was just the unsung hero. Everyone knows the 109. Everybody loves the 109. But nothing was quite like the Focke Wulf. It was faster, it was better, it was easier to maintain, it was easier to fly, especially landing and taking off because of this wide landing gear base. And the pilots just loved it a lot more. The ground crews just loved it a lot more. And the fact that it's just left out of conversations when it comes to the top 10 aircraft of World War II. It just doesn't get the respect and love it deserves. And I think it's quite sad, honestly, because the Focke Wulf is by far one of my favorite aircraft of World War II. Nothing beats the Mosquito, but this is a very close second. So I hope you learned something. If you did, leave it in the comments. Tell me what you learned or what you want to see next, because this has been a very fun endeavor, a very long awaited endeavor, and I really hope you enjoyed it. So leave a like if you did, subscribe if you want to see more, because I have to go and make my next video because I don't know how much time I have left to do so, and I want to get as many done as possible so that I can give them to you guys. So I've been Focke Man, and let's continue to build history.